Stars
Podcast. This is the
Let me talk to you. This is such good shit.
Yes, sir. And ladies, if you're watching, this is the Five Starr Wrestling Report podcast. If it is your first time watching the show, welcome aboard. As always, make sure you subscribe, make sure the bell icon is turned on. Leave a comment on today's show down below to let me know your thoughts on any or all material discussed. And please give this video a like. Takes half a second, but just click that like button and show your appreciation for the show. We got 2 shows every Monday and Friday, and we can be found on YouTube and Rumble. A link to the Rumble page is always in the description. And also, make sure you check out the description for my most recent Chairshot Article publications, or you can head on over to www.chairshot.com, click under the Opinion tab, and all of my work is labeled under the name Star. Article content is a crucial part to the Monday shows where we dive into exclusive analysis of my articles, and if that is something you are on board with, make sure you stay posted with the Monday show each week, and that is also the show where we cover AEW Rampage and NWA Power. Today, however, is the Friday show, where we will be taking a look at AEW Dynamite from Wednesday, a wretchedly bad program this week, with the notable exceptions that we will talk about in a few minutes. And we will also be continuing today with our retro review series of NWA World Championship Wrestling from 1985 and World Class Championship Wrestling of 1982. 2 very stellar programs this week, which we'll get to in a bit. But we will, in fact, begin with AEW Dynamite and get this show out of the way first. And boy, do I really want to get it out of the way. So let's get going. This is the December 8th edition of AEW Dynamite for those of you keeping score at home. Oh, we were a minute into Dynamite, and from the opener, we established a Bret Hart-Steve Austin WrestleMania double turn. For one night only, CM Punk became the biggest heel in the business, and MJF was right on par with Bruno Sammartino level of babyface fame. And yes, this show was from Long Island, so the MJF babyface pops were probably to be expected. But Punk ran with it, knowing pretty good and well MJF was going to be as over as he was. He singled out the Islanders for being a god-awful hockey team. He did just about every heel troll job in the book that you can possibly imagine to get under everyone's skin. And I mean, I can't say I hated it. If anything, Punk did a better job reading the crowd in one night than Cody Rhodes has for the majority of his wrestling career. And actually, I'll give it this, Punk had good material to work with here. Because the whole basis for the promo was basically built around the idea that the Long Island fans are so desperate for a hometown hero that they'll settle for a scum like MJF just to give him something to clasp onto. In essence, it wasn't really even a heel promo. It was basically Punk acknowledging the reality that, hey, I mean, if MJF's going to be your guy, I feel sorry for y'all, but you can choose to settle for someone mid, all the while the rest of the country will live in the real world and view MJF for the piece of human debris he really is. It was actually a pretty clever little promo, all things considered. And aside from that, he basically said he was going to be tuning into the Paige Danielson showdown next week for the belt, and regardless of who wins, Punk wants dibs on the next title shot. And it would appear that they're saving the Punk MJF match for later down the road, which if it turns out that they do add the layered wrinkle into this one, that I think they will, by making it a number one contenders match, that'll be real interesting to see who they go with in that match. I think most people presume the eventual plan is to get the belt on MJF sometime in 2022. And if they are going to have him be the guy to give Punk his first AEW loss, I mean, it's definitely something he'll be able to boast about in future promos. So there's a lot of good possibilities that could come out of that, both in the short term and long term. And as we've quickly established after reviewing the show for the last few weeks now, there are currently two things of any value on the show in terms of programs. You got CM Punk versus MJF and Bryan Danielson versus Hangman Adam Page, which means that about 90% of everything on the show right now is either lame or flat out trash. And boy, this show did a phenomenal job demonstrating that point clear as day, especially after that opening promo. We had this Dynamite Battle Royal thingamabob. And again, MJF proving to be the highlight of the entire thing with that little video package they aired before with him showing up in a varsity jacket. It's too bad they already have a gimmick on the show with an entire team based on varsity attire. But what can you do? I mean, I don't want to spend too much time on this, but I'm really not a big fan of battle royals in wrestling. And I mean, if you ask the average wrestling fan in 2021, I imagine they probably feel the same. It's not even so much the fact that there's just like too much going on and it's hard to keep track of everything. Generally, they're just boring matches with not a whole lot going on, and usually the only thing that ever matters in these kinds of matches are the things that happen in the last few minutes, which means about 90% of the time you're just impatiently sitting around and waiting for the last 2 or 3 minutes of the match for anything exciting to happen. 2 minutes into this match, and Jay Lethal got dumped by Matt Hardy like a total dweeb after a brass knuck shot. So, Jay Lethal is already a worthless jag on this show. Way to go, guys. Managed to fuck that guy up in a hurry. They did a spot in this match where MJF dumped out Wardlow, who was trying to eliminate Lio Rush and someone else I didn't even bother writing down. I think it was Lee Johnson. So they're still doing the slow burn breakup with those two. And like I said, it came down to the last couple minutes where anything really notable occurred. What happened was it came down to MJF, Dante Martin, and Ricky Starks. And for those of you that have been, or that have not been following the program, they did a deal a week or so ago where Dante signed a contract to join up with Team Taz. And, I mean, at the time, I think most people assumed it was a swerve. But they ran with it for an entire week before Dante swerved Team Taz back, and he eliminated Starks here, which actually got a pretty decent pop from the crowd. So the winners of the match are Dante and MJF, and they will be squaring it out for the Diamond Ring gimmick on next week's show. And had they just cut the segment right then and there with Dante getting the one-up on Team Taz, and they just spent a few minutes showing Taz's reaction, promising to get revenge, it would have been fine. But of course, this is AEW, so they can never just leave well enough alone. No, we must do more shit. So Ricky jumps Dante after the bell and starts pummeling on him like a total dweeb. Meanwhile, MJF is going up the ramp and doing the tease. Do I run back and make the save, or do I leave Dante for dead? Yeah, fuck it. What's kayfabe anymore, right? So MJF eventually runs back down and just kind of gets into a shoving match with Ricky, which was very anticlimactic. And then MJF swerves everyone anyway by helping Ricky beat down Dante again. All the while, the only thing I keep shouting at the screen the entire time this is going on is, where the fuck is Lio Rush? Apparently he was out for a coffee break or something. Sorry, Dante. So who should eventually run out to make the save but CM Punk? And he once again receives a nice warm fuck you reception from the crowd. And in a matter of less than 3 minutes after the match, they managed to take the spotlight away from Dante Martin and the Team Taz deal, and honestly just made Dante look like a complete scrub going into his match with MJF next week. He was just a punching bag in this segment, regardless of the fact that it should have been a bigger deal that he stuck it to the heels on Team Taz. And of course, we all know what this is leading to next week with the MJF Dante match. Team Taz is going to do some kind of run-in at some point and fuck Dante over. Because, of course, we can never just let guys wrestle on this show. No, here in TNA Impact Wrestling, every match must have 14,000 things going on all the time, 15 to 20 run-ins on a given show. So that was that segment. Up next in AEW's next installment of Let's Cram as many bodies as we can possibly get on the show, we get this 8-man with Jurassic Express in the Varsity Blondes taking on 2.0 in the Acclaimed. And if there are two guys that did not need to be seen in the ring at the same time, what with the similarities with the flowing locks, it is Jungle Boy and Griff Garrison. So what do? They put them together in a tag match. I will say, though, I have seen a handful of Varsity Blondes matches. Very underutilized tag team in AEW. Especially Pillman. And admittedly so, I popped at the Caster Potshot promo on the Cuomo brothers beforehand. Fuck those two asshats. This match was inoffensively fine for a multi-man TV match. It sure as fuck was better than the 6-man I'll talk about in a minute. That's for damn sure. If anything, because at least this match was easier to follow as an actual tag match instead of whatever you even quantify as a Bucks match at this point. I really don't even know anymore. Whatever it is, it sucks. But they did some stuff for a while. Faces ran wild at the beginning. Pillman eventually got cut off for the Heat about midway through. Luchasaurus got the hot tag and ran wild on all four heels. There were no notable botches or screwy shenanigans at any point that I could conceive of. We did have the usual 4-man breakdown at the end where everyone just kind of came in and started hitting moves on each other, but this one only lasted for about 30 seconds or so before Daniel Garcia tried to run in at the end. And he ended up getting cut off by Eddie Kingston and flung into the steps. In another AEW case of, I guess we're allegedly supposed to presume that Kingston was just waiting in the entrance tunnel for Garcia to do the predictable run-in at the end. Which honestly, considering it happens in about 85 to 90% of AEW's TV matches anyway, it's probably a safe bet to always assume that there will be a run-in at some point or another. And of course, Jungle Boy taps out Bowens with the snare trap almost instantly. After which we immediately cut to the back. This time, for whatever Kingston was attempting to do here, I'm still not really sure. He sort of hijacks one of the cameramen, and he's trying to cut a raging promo backstage, but they did not have the audio preempted, so you couldn't hear a goddamn thing he said. Because this show really is a modern-day version of 1999 WCW Nitro at this point. And before you know it, 2.0 and Garcia are back there brawling with Kingston. Somehow Ortiz was in there doing something. I have no idea what was going on here. The announcers clearly had no idea what was going on. It was... it was an AEW skit. What can I say? Just a bunch of shit happening for no reason, and we're all supposed to somehow care. But I'll tell you something. You know what I really desperately needed at this point in the show to make it better? You know what this show really needed to get those ratings up? A match featuring Chuck Taylor and the Beta Bucks. And for those of you that cannot take a joke, that was sarcasm. And we were informed in the early stages of this match from Taz that Chuck Taylor is, for lack of better terms, lackadaisical. No shit, Taz? Would never have been able to figure that out based on the giant fucking beer gut and the terrible hygiene. But thanks for the update. This sucked. And honestly, like, I'm not even judging that purely on the fact that it was a Bucks match. This was just a fucking awful wrestling match. There was no heat for it. All four guys looked like shit. Especially Rocky Romero, man. I don't know if he was just having like an off night or if he genuinely had no idea how to do a coherent wrestling match with the Beta Bucks. Honestly, who could blame him? Wrestling the Bucks on this show has got to be like watching a monkey fucking a football. Goes without saying at this point, but of course there's about a 5-minute period here where Matt and Nick are just doing random double team moves in and out of the ring, and the worst official in the history of professional wrestling, Rick Knox, just stood by and let it all happen. It's actually kind of semi-amusing at this point. Must be nice to be an AEW official. Seriously, like, what are the qualifications to being a referee in AEW? It really must not be all that hard. It does not appear that you have to have an above-average IQ either. It's the easiest job in the world. All you do is show up, wear a striped shirt, and count shoulders to the mat. And the rest of the time, you can stand around, flail your arms in the air when shit goes awry, and you don't have to enforce any kind of rules. These people are probably making a high 5, maybe even low 6-figure incomes every year. Sign me up for that, man. It's a hell of a lot more than I made working manager positions for Rite Aid and Whole Foods for 3 years. We had... God, my notes are all over the place for this entire show. Yeah, if you couldn't already tell people, this one is totally off the cuff this week. Because this show sucked the cock. Who won? Oh yeah, that's right. Matt and Nick hit the Meltzer driver Dillia Bob on Rocky. But that, of course, was not the big story here. Because after the obligatory, predictable post-match beatdown, after Adam Cole has already spiked Orange Cassidy on top of his head with the Panama Sunrise from the top rope, it is at this point that Trent Beretta decides to make his big return. And, of course, it is AEW, so no one thinks ahead of time. Trent's buds are getting beaten and massacred in the ring like schmucks, and Trent's not making a beeline for the ring. He is not expressing any kind of concern that his friends are in any grave danger or trouble. Nope. In fact, he is so calm, cool, and collected here, he is riding in style this week to make his triumphant return. And he is hitching a ride with who other than Sue in the minivan, which might have been the biggest pop from Excalibur we've seen in the entire year. Of course, that fucking indie dweeb is going to get rock hard for this lame undercard garbage. And of course, upon his return, Trent has now shaved his head, so he now looks like every generic indie geek you've ever seen. It actually gave me flashbacks to the same thing that Kazarian did years ago, where, like, after having grown out his hair for several years and actually displaying a nice head of hair, he just randomly showed up one week on television with a buzz cut and looked totally generic. Same exact thing with Trent here. He looks like just another guy. So naturally, of course, he fits right in here on AEW. And of course, the best friends did their stupid pose, eventually sending the heels packing, and everyone had a nice beat-off session in the ring together. This whole thing was the dirt worst of AEW wrapped up into one segment. A bullshit match with the most unlikable, unrelatable comedy characters filled with every indie garbage spot you could possibly muster up. And of course, Well, of course, everyone's going to love it because nobody knows what good quality professional wrestling is anymore in 2021. We had probably the single worst acting I think I've ever seen involving female talent on a wrestling program. Talent. I use that term as loosely as humanly possible. Oh, and stop me if you've heard this one before. Ruby attempted to cut a promo backstage, but was unceremoniously cut off and got into an eventual brawl. It is like it's so predictable and so uncreative, it is perfect for AEW television. And we were also informed that Penelope Ford will be wrestling on Friday. Woot. Then we had more troll work from Cody Jarrett. And actually, now that I think about it, this was such an apparent troll job from Cody this week. I am now convinced that this whole babyface persona he's masking right now is an absolute total work. Seriously, there's no way he's this delusional. When he came out during that Sammy Guevara interview and outright told Sammy that Tony Khan granted him a shot at the TNT title later in the month, I threw up my hand and said, that's it. We're done. The jig is up with this whole Cody Rhodes babyface thing. It is an outright rib at this point. And especially when he added that little detail at the end where Cody goes to shake Sammy's hand. He teases he was going to leave through the entrance or the heel entrance tunnel, but then he turned back over his shoulder and left through the babyface tunnel. I got it. He's totally fucking with the people at this point. And I'll tell you something, man. If they are not going to go with Cody beating Paige for the world title, they absolutely need to go with Cody beating Sammy for the TNT title. You want to talk about a way to get guaranteed nuclear heat at this point? Cody is absolutely the guy to do this with. He needs to be the one to win the TNT title on the final Rampage of the year. If he's going to go full Jeff Jarrett mode, then fucking go all the way with it, man. Ride that horse to the finish line. You know, I've said it before. The Punk, MJF, and Danielson Page program are two of the best things that are going on with the show right now. And I said at the beginning that they're the only two good things going on. That is a lie. I have said before that the delusional, pretentious, ego-driven troll babyface Cody Rhodes is the single greatest psychological storyline in professional wrestling today. And now that we're well into it by now, I stand by that. This is fucking fantastic. Seriously, man, I cannot wait to see how they pull this off on the 24th. If that is going to be the lasting memory of AEW in 2021 before the new year, with Cody Rhodes holding up the TNT title, getting booed out of the building, god damn it, let's go out with a bang. Oh my god. This show sucks. And on the subject of untalented females, we got a Riho match this week. Yippee skippy. Riho, who is still sporting the preschool ballerina class attire for this one. I paid very little attention to this. Riho's matches are completely preposterous on every level. Jamie Hayter in there, I mean, just... I'm sorry, it looked like she was abusing a preschooler. It's absolutely ridiculous. I don't know. Forget it. Alright, you changed my mind. Okay. No one else is going to mention it, so fuck it. Guess I got to be the bearer of common sense on this one. Look. I know professional wrestling is fake. Or scripted. Sorry, I don't want to trigger anyone. If we're going to operate from that mentality for a minute, let's just try to suspend disbelief a little bit here. I know it's hard to do that watching AEW. But work with me here. If this were real, again, trying to view this from the standpoint that there's a shred of reality and credibility to this goddamn sport that's been completely neutered by modern wrestling today, please explain to me in what universe that Riho has any believability as a credible fighter. Please explain to me what logical, rational person takes Riho seriously in the world of sports, especially a physical combat sport. I don't care if the story is she's an underdog babyface that fights from underneath. She looks like she's 12. She's one of the most frail-looking human beings I've ever seen in a wrestling ring. Her offense sucks. Her ring gear sucks. I just can't take her seriously as a pro wrestler. Maybe if she's wrestling the junior minis in Mexico, I could suspend a little bit of disbelief. But unless she's having back and forth matches with Marco Stunt, I don't buy Riho as a legit athlete. It's just too absurd. It's the same thing I used to bitch about when they had Marco doing competitive six-mans against full-grown athletes on this show. It's not authentic, it's not credible, and it makes your company look Bush League. So there's my spiel on that. Anyway, moving on. Apparently, we are seeing Hook debut on Friday. That'll be something. Apparently, we're also getting Hikaru Shida and Serena Deeb next week, which I'm definitely looking forward to. I thought their last match was probably one of the best AEW women's matches I've ever seen, if not the best. Now, I love Serena. Not the biggest fan of Shida in the world, but she's had some pretty good matches here and there. And, it is a match with two female athletes that I can take credibly on paper, so that's always a thumbs up. Then we had the most unintentionally hilarious thing I think AEW has ever done. This actually made me laugh. Just how stupid it was. I gotta prep myself for this one. Alright. So the Varsity Blondes are out with Tony on the stage for an interview. And Tony's doing the whole shindig, what's next for the Varsity Blondes? And without skipping a beat, right on cue, the lights go out, and before one word can be spoken, they come back on. Malachi Black is standing next to Tony, and everyone's just kind of awkwardly standing around like it's break time at the water cooler at the office. I don't fucking know. And after Black goes to remove his reindeer mask, he does the only thing that Malachi Black apparently knows how to do in this company. He spits mist. And this time, he gets Julia Hart in the face, who I have not seen a lot of Julia Hart on this show. I know she's only like 20 or 21 years old, so she's very new to the business. But she did a fantastic job selling this. And the lights went back out again, and after Black disappears, Julia's on the ground screaming and crying. She's instantly the most sympathetic babyface on this show, bar none. I had to tip my hat to her, man, because she was phenomenal with her role here, regardless of how stupid the whole setup to this thing was. But she played her part, and she nailed it. But that was not the dumb part. Because after this tragic occurrence with poor old Julia Hart getting blinded by Malachi's mist, what happens? Well, we come back to the program after commercial, and what's the first thing we hear from Excalibur? It's main event time! The announcers are happy, they're smiling, they're totally pumped for this main event match. Never mind the fact that we just had a girl get fucking blinded by a toxic mist not less than 5 minutes ago. God forbid we show a replay of that, or, I don't know, fucking mention it in passing. Maybe you want to follow up on that a little bit. Maybe you want to spend a few minutes talking about the seriousness of the situation. Oh, no. Can't do that. because it is ever so important that we get a John Silver match in the main event. Fuck the Julia Hart situation. Who cares about her? God, this pissed me off so much. These people are so fucking stupid. How does something like that get glossed over in the formatting? Does anyone have a shred of intelligence enough to say, wait a second, guys, you're doing a pretty serious angle here by putting poor old defenseless girl in a vulnerable situation. Don't you think we should maybe spend a few minutes touching on this after the break? No one thought of that? Just me? I'm the only rational, logical wrestling fan that's left in the universe? I can figure this shit out. And I've never worked a day in this business in my life. These fucking numbskulls do this for a living and can't figure it out. Never underestimate the validity of the phrase, most people suck at their jobs. That might be one of the most accurate universal truths to live by. Makes you really value yourself and realize just how stupid people are. What a bunch of fucking morons. And let's talk about the Danielson-Silver match. Since apparently this was such an important thing that it completely overshadowed a girl getting blinded on live national television. Well, long story short, it was another job order clown having a remotely semi-competitive match with Danielson for 10 plus minutes. What's more to say about it? John Silver's irrelevant, much like the entire Dark Order is irrelevant by this point. There's absolutely no reason why Danielson shouldn't be steamrolling these guys in 5 minutes or less. No, instead they're having Danielson working back and forth 50-50 matches with these guys and actually letting him get in offense on him. Totally absurd. But Danielson ended up hitting Silver with a Gotch pile driver and submitted him with a hold of some sort. Honestly, I don't even know why he didn't just try to pin him after the pile driver, but that's just me. And of course, he does the post-match promo, says that he promised he was going to kick everyone's head in, but he forgot to do the same with Silver. So he goes to pick him up. Adam Page runs down and sends Danielson running for the hills, and he just ended the show by telling him that next week he's going to kick the cowboy shit out of him. Which is probably the best thing Page possibly could have said, so I'm actually glad they went for something short and concise with a promo for a change. I'm sorry, I still can't get over that whole Julia Hart angle. They could have had something really great there, man. And instead of staying on it and trying to milk the gravity of the situation, they took the TNA Russo era approach and said, nope, got too much shit going on with this show. Got to keep things rolling at our normal breakneck pace. I don't get it. Like, can you imagine a scenario back in like 86 NWA, like Baby Doll gets misted in the face by someone or gets blinded in some capacity and they just kind of gloss over it and move on with the rest of the show like nothing ever happened? No, of course they wouldn't do that. They'd probably spend 5 to 10 minutes talking about that. If anything, it would be the main event angle of the show. It'd be something they'd be talking about for weeks after the fact. Sorry if my brain's wired from an old school approach, but I mean, I wrote about this in my Chairshot article, and I'll be talking about a little bit more of this on Monday, but you know, as much as we all like to sit here and rave about the greatness of the Attitude Era, Crash TV professional wrestling really did do a large number in destroying the relevancy and the gravity of wrestling angles. Because, like, I know wrestling fans won't ever appreciate this because they just didn't grow up watching this, but angles in professional wrestling used to fucking mean something. They used to actually be... They used to have meaning and significance. And it's just like... Nothing ever matters anymore. Especially when I'm watching AEW, man. It's non-stop shit happening all the time. Nothing sinks in. nothing means a goddamn thing when it's over. Like I said, talk about how great the Attitude Era was. I know for a lot of young wrestling fans, especially modern wrestling fans, that was the greatest period of wrestling they've ever seen. And it probably was for them. But I don't think we should look over the fact that there was a lot of bad stuff that happened around that time. Like that 90, 97, 98 period to like 2001, like right past the end of the Invasion angle. Yeah, like there was some good stuff during that period, but there was also a lot of shit. And more often than not, a lot of it was just bad. Like plain bad, not good television. I get so many of those vibes watching AEW. I just can't get over that. The Julia Hart thing on the show was stupid, even by AEW standards. That is really saying something. It's like I said at the beginning, man. AEW's got two great things going on right now. Three if you count the Cody stuff with the whole troll job thing. You got Punk MJF stuff, and you got the Danielson Page stuff. And luckily, those are the two featured key programs at the moment. And in essence, it is good that they started the show hot and ended the show hot. But the stuff sandwiched in between is like slow Chinese water torture at this point. And that really hit home after watching that Beta Bucks match. That was like 2019 doldrum level of AEW Dynamite suctitude. Just awful, awful television. Everything I hate about AEW's product was crystallized in that one Bucks match. And then the Julia Hart thing just put me over the edge. AEW is really lucky they got Punk and Danielson right now. Because those guys have been real saviors of this show coming out of this whole post-pandemic era of pro wrestling. Maybe you sprinkle in a little bit of MJF in there too. But by and large, this show is currently being carried by Punk and Danielson. And that was abundantly clear after watching this show. I mean, I will say this. I'm genuinely looking forward to next week. I sure hope to God they knock it out of the park, because it's like I said in my Rampage report this past week. You know, everything AEW has done post Full Gear has been very hit and miss. And by and large, most of it has been a big miss. You remove Danielson, Punk, MJF, and Page from the equation, these shows have been garbage post pay-per-view. Absolute garbage. And you can pump the show up all you want. All you AEW nut huggers out there that praise this company to no end and every AEW show's the best AEW show of all time, go fuck off. Seriously. If you want this company to succeed and you want this to be your alternative, you want this to be a real competition to WWE, start calling them out for their bullshit. This show sucked. Aside from, like I said, aside from the MJF Punk stuff, the Danielson Page stuff, this show was trash. Let's talk about something good. Let's talk about NWA World Championship Wrestling from December 7th of the year 1985. And we begin with, as my notes directly read here, a dig tease of the Dusty Rhodes Ric Flair title match from the Starrcade pay-per-view. And by that, I merely mean that they showed Flair's entrance, and as soon as he got to the ring, they went to the opening graphics of the show, which, by and large, they are letting you know, even in the year 1985, gotta buy the tape if you want to see the match in full. And speaking of such, the Flair-Dusty story ended up being the big theme for the night, which I will talk about more when we get to it, but needless to say, it is a post-pay-per-view story that I had completely forgotten about, and honestly, I am kind of ashamed that I didn't do a little bit more Fallout research from the pay-per-view, because it is a very crucial story that leads into 1986 that probably should have been given more attention than I initially gave it. And trust me when I tell you, David Crockett was none too happy about the whole deal. But following that, we get Tully Blanchard and Baby Doll out for a promo. And Tully's spiel here was centered around the idea that he never said "I quit" at Starrcade, and he puts over the grave miscarriage of justice that was him losing the United States title to Magnum. Our opening bout for the week, it is the Rock and Roll Express taking on the Jeffers brothers. Rock and Roll coming out for this match without the World Tag Belts, so I presume this match might have been taped before the pay-per-view. Not a whole lot to the match, just a quick squash to put the faces over. Obviously, I do not have to inform you all as to how crazy Morton and Gibson over to these people. It is still crazy to think that to this day, Ricky Morton is still working sporadic wrestling matches for the National Wrestling Alliance. I'm actually kind of tempted now to go back and watch the NWA Hard Times pre-show just to see Ricky Morton in that Gauntlet Battle Royal that I didn't watch. I mean, I know the dude's not a spring chicken at this stage in the game, but it is amazing that that guy is still working on a part-time basis in the year 2021. It's not to say that Gibson and Morton ever worked an unsafe, daredevilish ring style, but, I mean, in the year 1985, they were kind of seen as the flashy, high-flying younglings. And by this point, they had still been relatively new to the wrestling business. God knows you're able to recognize that considering how much of a well-oiled machine these guys were. But if you were placing bets in the 80s and the 90s as to where the Rock and Roll Express would probably be by the mid-2000s or even the early 2010s, you probably would not have been crazy to think that they would have been long past retired. Yet here we are, it is 2021, and they're still an active part of the business today. God love them. So then we get Ronnie Garvin taking on Tommy Lane. Still noted the one single Tommy Lane fan in the crowd. It's probably a lost cause at this point, but damn it all, she's not going to give up trying to cheer him on. I kind of went on my Ronnie rant last week, so I'm not going to repeat it here. Just go watch last week's show if you need further elaboration on it. But I should note again that Garvin does become an integral part of the show in the year 86 and onward. And it is going to be very interesting to see if my opinion changes on him as we go back through the archives of these shows. Had a quick promo with Magnum TA putting over his United States title win in the Bunkhouse Stampede deal, which I believe was the kickstart of this whole concept in the year 1985. And for those of you that need a quick refresher, the whole concept was a wacky gimmick battle royal where guys would bring their own weapons and gimmicks to the ring to use. I think eventually over time it also became a tournament. And I mean, the whole thing was essentially designed to increase ticket sales and house numbers, but you know, when you look back through the lens of the modern eyes of a smart mark, the gimmick thing was kind of hokey. Like, first thing immediately comes to mind upon rereading of the history of some of these bunkhouse stampede things. So if guys were allowed to bring whatever weapon they wanted to the ring, why wouldn't someone bring a gun? Or a chainsaw? Or a machete? Or something lethal enough that would guarantee victory? And yes, I know I'm being facetious about it, but no, not really. Plus, when you factor in that Dusty won it the 4 years they ran it, which did get under a lot of people's skin, and the fact that it generally didn't do great business for the NWA. I mean, you saw that by the year 1989, they had done away with the concept entirely. So, well, we were supposed to get Arn Anderson versus the Italian Stallion, but I guess Arn decided that he didn't want to work, so Nikita Koloff took his place instead. Either that or maybe Arn had the runs. But Nikita killed him with a running sickle at the end, which actually was kind of amusing. If for no other reason than the story they were playing up here was that Nikita was pissed about losing at the pay-per-view, so he dominates like 99% of the match. And at the tail end, Stallion gets like maybe one or two clean punches in. And as he goes to charge Nikita in the corner, that is the point where Nikita hulks up and nearly takes his head off with a clothesline. Great stuff. But following this, we get the real meat of the show. And that is everything centered around the controversy of the NWA World title picture with Flair and Dusty. So we already established at the beginning of the night, something I totally neglected as one of the key elements of the Starrcade 85 title match during my recap. But I am going to do my best to rectify that with a stellar explanation of the follow-up. So senior referee Tommy Young comes out, and he recaps the last several minutes of the match with him getting bumped and getting blindsided by Arn and Ole. And the whole idea here is that before Tommy had gotten back into the ring, he had already seen Arn running interference through his periphery. And his goal was to call off the match because at the first moment he saw Arn hit the ring, he decided that the match was over. Unfortunately, before Tommy could make the call to the timekeeper, Dusty had shoved Arn on top of Tommy, which prevented him from throwing out the match. And at that point, Ole had hit the ring to lay out Dusty with the running knee. And that is when the second official ran in and they did the Flash Cradle 3 that Dusty used to get the pin on Flair. And of course, the entire time this is going on, David Crockett is just sickened and disgusted by this whole travesty. He won't even dignify this with a response. He's so offended by it. And he even goes as far as to get in Tommy's face. And honestly, I thought Crockett was about to get into fisticuffs with poor old Tommy Young right then and there at the booth. But long story short, Flair was awarded back the belt via screw job. And again, this was a story that I had totally forgotten ever happened. I mean, even going back to the time machine and reading about the build-up to this match. So out comes Flair to rub it in, particularly to Crockett. Tells him to shut his mouth and sign the checks and leave the wrestling to the Nate. To which several men in the crowd responded by going, "You tell him, Rick." And again, in the year 1985, prime heel Ric Flair was already getting babyface pops. And he's still styling and profiling in blue cashmere. Here we get the Road Warriors against Adrian Bivens and Paul Garner. And remember last time when I said something to the effect of the Road Warriors were never a pretty sight to watch in the ring, but they were always super entertaining to watch, just based on the fact that you never knew what to expect out of them? Well, apparently the referees around this time thought the same thing too, because as was the gimmick with Hawk and Animal, their matches typically started with them making a beeline to the ring and getting into the fight, right before the opening bell. So for this match, the Road Warriors were not even in the ring before the ref said, "Fuck it, ring the bell." I'm not even going to try to gain any form of control beforehand. And that was not even the most hilarious part of this entire 2-minute match. There's a spot in this match. I cannot tell you how many times I rewound it, but it was the most ludicrous thing I think I've ever seen in my 25-odd-something years of watching wrestling. Hawk goes to whip Garner off the ropes for an Irish whip. And for those of you that have never seen a wrestling match before, allow for me to explain the fundamental premise of an Irish whip. The idea behind an Irish whip is someone goes to grab hold of a guy's wrist, and he uses the ropes as momentum to slingshot the guy off the ropes, and he sends him to the opposite end of the ring, where if the guy knows what he's doing, the guy taking the whip will use the ropes as leverage to bounce back toward the guy giving the initial whip. In all my years of watching wrestling, I do not think I have ever seen someone fuck up an Irish whip to the extent that Paul Garner did in this match. But all I can say is if you have never seen this before and you have the Peacock subscription, Go watch the December 7th, 1985 edition of the NWA World Championship Wrestling show on the Superstation. Fast forward to the Road Warriors match and watch the entire thing. Hawk goes to whip Garner off the ropes, and instead of Garner running toward the opposite end of the ring and using the other side of the ring ropes to bounce off and come running toward Hawk body first, Garner takes the whip into the ropes, and I wrote down moonwalked backward toward Hawk, wherein Hawk attempted to give Garner a clothesline, but because Garner was completely unaware of the fact that he was about to be given said clothesline, it took him like an extra 5 seconds to react to this before taking the bump. And the look on Hawk's face, it was a look that you would not imagine. It was a brief moment of Hawk breaking kayfabe and acting like a disappointed wrestling trainer watching his students fuck up moves on the first day of wrestling school. He was so beside himself watching this idiot Paul Garner not be able to take a basic Irish whip off the ropes. Like I said, go watch it on the clock if you have the subscription. You will not be disappointed. So then we get our Championship Challenge Series match for the week. It's Arn, Ole, and Tully taking on Magnum TA, Sam Houston, and Billy Jack Haynes. And I can assure you that unlike the Road Warriors match, this match actually had men that were capable of taking competent Irish whips off the ropes. So we were already off to a good start here. But this is a great match from bell to bell. And I actually didn't think it was going to be as good as it was going in. We got maybe a minute into this match before the people started a unanimous "I quit" chant to Tully, which is actually kind of goofy if you think about it. Like, wouldn't it be more fitting if the chant was "You quit"? I don't know. Good stuff with Magnum and Tully going at it early on, which the people went nuts for. Of course, I do not need to remind you of how phenomenal pre-Horseman matches were around this time, especially when it comes to Ole and Arn's work. Again, it baffles me to no end that AEW put together some of the most illogical and schizophrenic tag matches on the market today, yet they've got fucking Arn Anderson under contract with their company. One of the best tag wrestling workers in the entire business. Unbelievable. But Faces controlled a lot of the offense early on before the break. Great moment in there with Billy Jack Haynes giving all three guys press slams. Crowd went nuts for that too. There's a period where they're getting the heat on Magnum right before the hot tag, and the only thing I could think in the back of my mind the entire time this beatdown was going on was, for the love of God, Magnum, please pull your tights up. I was getting a little preview of the nether regions, and it was getting pretty dicey there for a while. A little bit of that farmer's tan action going on. But Magnum was great babyface in peril, which is kind of interesting too, because you think with Sam Houston being in this match, he would have been the guy to take the beat down, but nope. Magnum was the guy that took the extended heat in this one. And actually, Houston ended up getting the hot tag at the end to run wild. And, of course, as expected, things broke down toward the end, refs trying to gain control, and as Houston has Ole pinned, Arn goes up top and gives Houston a double axe to the back. Haynes tries to grab a hold of Arn and put him in the full Nelson, and that is when Ole snuck the pinfall in on Houston to secure the win for the heels. Good shit, man. And for everyone out there that's going to call me a hypocrite, oh, but you said you hate tag matches that break down into pandemonium because they're breaking the rules. And to that I say, no, I never said that. I said I hate tag matches that break down into pandemonium for no reason that never lead to anything of substance. And this was a case where the ref lost control at the end of the match momentarily, but the chaos actually led to the finish. Not like in the case of AEW, where guys just randomly decided various points to have a four-way before the break spot because they get bored standing on the apron. There's a right way and a wrong way to do that kind of stuff, and more often than not, most companies get it completely wrong. We had a quick Dusty promo where he said, that I can live with the decision, Daddy. Because what we proved at the gathering is that the Nature Boy can be beat. He can be pinned. He can be had. And all that means is when the time is right, Dusty's gonna beat him again. Because he's feeling fine. And if there were anyone other than Dusty cutting this promo, I would probably be sitting here right now shitting on the idea that the rightful champion got screwed out of the belt and came out here basically giving fuck all about it. But because Dusty is a genius, he knew exactly what kind of promo to cut, and he did not disappoint. We had the Road Warriors out again to basically declare World War III on the Russians, and I'm not sure if I wrote this down accurately, but I think Hawk said something to the effect of recommending the Russians take up a career in the limb repairman business, because Hawk and Animal are going to rip off their limbs and leave them for dead. Sounds utterly painful. And bloody. And on that rather joyous note, we had Jimmy Valiant versus Vernon Deaton. And if you have seen one Jimmy Valiant match, you've pretty much seen them all. His entire offense is eye rakes, arm drags, and rest holds, and a finishing elbow drop. And his signature phrase during his matches is, "Alright, alright, alright." And he just kind of repeats the same phrase over and over again in rather comedic fashion. I also get a good laugh out of listening to Valiant provide his own color commentary throughout the match. Ain't no one like the Boogie Woogie Man. I'll tell you what. I tell you what. Following this, we had the Russians back out for a promo. And I will be outright frank with you, I did not recall a single thing that was said in this promo. Not that I couldn't understand the horrible fake Russian accents, but I literally just zoned out for most of it. I actually focused a lot of my attention on watching Nikita's facials and mannerisms, which are always top-notch. I think they said something about wanting to beat the Road Warriors on American turf because it'd be more humiliating or something. Terry Taylor beat Brodie Chase in a short deal. Best thing I can compliment about this match is the crowd providing their most patient form of get this match the fuck done and over with. Pretty much in the nicest possible way they could. Most of the crowd was chanting for Terry Taylor to take it home. Probably because the match went on for 3 or 4 minutes too long, and most of it consisted of Terry laying on the mat with Brodie in an arm wrench. And actually, now that I look back, I don't think Tony or David said one word during this entire match. Maybe they fell asleep. Who knows? And speaking of short, the Barbarian killed George South in relatively short order. He also whiffed a diving headbutt entirely, but I won't give him a hard time because I know if given the opportunity, the Barbarian would have no problem giving me a shoot headbutt. Buddy Landell faced Larry Fine from the Three Stooges and knocked him loopy. Oh, I forgot too. J.J. Dillon did a pre-match promo at the booth to basically put Buddy in his title reign over. A title reign that lasts less than 3 weeks, but technically we aren't really supposed to know that at the time. Funny bit of comedy in this match where Buddy's hashing it out with David Crockett at the booth. And as he has the jobber pinned on the mat, demanding respect, David nonchalantly chimes in with, they're giving you what you deserve. The subtlety of David Crockett on this show never ceases to be funny. And speaking of funny, we got a Paul Jones promo. And boy, was he in rare form this week. This, ladies and gentlemen, this was peak Paul Jones. I think I found the secret formula as to what made Paul such a great promo. To be blunt, he really wasn't that good at it, but he also realized that even if he stumbled over himself, the last thing that he could do was just stop mid-promo and lose his train of thought. So, like, even if he just started blurting out a bunch of random shit that made no sense, and like he just started repeating a bunch of previous dialogue, it usually wound up coming across as funny in delivery. The entire promo here was Paul Jones talking for like 2 or 3 minutes about how strong the Barbarian is. And one of his lines in this promo, I am not ribbing, I wrote this down verbatim because I was howling with laughter listening to this several times over. He says, and I quote, "There's one man that walks around like he's got in his head that he thinks that he's the strongest man. The arms right there, like this. He just got done shaving his underarms. I'm talking about you, Billy Jack." And it wasn't even like the sheer delivery of that line that had me rolling. What had me laughing was while Paul was trying to form a coherent sentence here, they put the camera on the Barbarian, who's just looking down off camera, shifting his eyes back and forth like, good Lord, what in the fuck is this man trying to say right now? There's also a line in here where Paul goes, "The Barbarian's so strong, every time he hugs his wife, she passes out." And at that point, I lost it. Like, I literally had to take a break and take a walk to regain my composure. I could not stop laughing. I actually did an audio capture of this promo in case I just wanted to play the promo instead of talking about it. Yeah, fuck it. Let me just replay the whole thing. I can't do it justice.
Back in ringside, right here on World Championship Wrestling. Number 1, Paul Jones, along with the Barbarian with him. Tony, it's obvious. It's obvious that these people got in here free. This is the type of cooperation you get when you give somebody a free lunch. There ain't no free lunch. And you people shut up and listen to what I have to say. I've got on TV here numerous times, and I told everybody how strong the Barbarian is. And I've received letters saying, well, prove how strong he is. Well, let me tell you something right now. You know, who is the strongest man around here? Dusty Rhodes doesn't claim to be the strongest man. He just claims to be the best. But there's one man that walks around like he's got it in his head that he thinks that he's the strongest man. The arms right here like this, like he just got through shaving his under his arms. I'm talking about you, Billy Jack. You think you're so strong? Well, why don't you have a test of strength? Why don't you show the people and show the Barbarian how strong you are? Or why don't I show you how strong the Barbarian is? Well, let me tell you something, he's so strong that every time he hugs his wife, she goes out cold. And let me tell you, if you don't believe it, you come up to the Barbarian and you say, hug me. And I guarantee you one thing, Billy Jack, from now on, we're not going to hear you say anything about how strong you are because you know deep down inside that you're going to be embarrassed. Let's go. Let's go to the ring.
I take back every negative thing I've ever said about Paul Jones. I may have not recognized how great he was at the time, but after having heard him do several promos on this show, this one took the cake. I am now an avid Paul Jones fan on this program. I want these kinds of Paul Jones promos every week on this show from here on out. And final match of the night was Ivan Koloff and Crusher Khrushchev beating Jimmy Del Rey and some other guy whose name I forgot to bother writing down. And the announcers never mentioned who it was either, so I guess it wasn't all that important. And the finish was the best part here, wherein after the Russians are just having their way with these two dweebs, the finish is Khrushchev decking the one guy with a sickle, and while Jimmy's standing there on the apron watching, not only does he not bother try to break up the fall, but he doesn't even bat an eye when his partner gets creamed with this clothesline. Probably just thinking to himself, boy, that sucks. Glad that wasn't me in there. And last segment was Tully coming out for one more promo. And whereas in the first promo, he was out there in a t-shirt and no sunglasses, here he's decked out in full casual attire with the sweater, the pop collar button down, the blazer, and all. What a professional, man. Working a match on the show and still dressing to come back out to cut a 30-second promo at the end of the night. It's kind of a wacky promo, too. Basically, he just told Flair to get himself a good lawyer because even though they managed to overturn the decision from Starrcade to give him back the belt, they could still hypothetically take it away from him if he's not careful. Interesting little cliffhanger to go out on. And obviously, we all know where this ends up leading to by the end of the year once JJ enters the fray. But we're edging closer to 86, and they're really starting to lay the groundwork for the post-Starrcade feuds. And really setting the precedent for what would have been a phenomenal year in 86 for the NWA. Very enjoyable show this week. Promos were particularly on point, especially that fucking Paul Jones promo. The six-man was great. The plot follow-up with Flair and Dusty was great. The Russians Road Warrior stuff was really good. Yeah, definitely a thumbs-up program this week. And as we hit the rewind button back a few more years, and hedging down south, let's talk about World Class Championship Wrestling from, this would have been the December 11th edition, 1982. And Bill Mercer's riding solo this week. He also grew an entire beard in 1 week time span. Some great genetics right there. But the big theme for the night here was all centered around the King Kong Bundy and Kevin Von Erich main event. And Bundy did a promo from the opening all based around the American Heavyweight Championship, which apparently Kevin was champion at this point, despite the fact that we've never seen him carry a belt around on this show. And after doing some relatively brief research on statistics involving the Texas NWA American Heavyweight Championship, I believe the story goes something to the effect of the following. Fritz Von Erich had his official retirement match in June of 82, defeating Abdullah the Butcher, which then led to American Heavyweight Champion Fritz to vacate the belt immediately afterward, and Bundy was awarded the belt several days later, and then was eventually defeated by Kevin in September. I hope I'm not butchering that timeline entirely, but albeit it was not particularly easy finding a documented timeline of the NWA American Heavyweight title, believe it or not. Our first match for the week is the Spoiler taking on Jose Lothario, who was the ultimate babyface of babyfaces here, with him signing autographs for the kids right before the opening bell. Match was pretty terrible, and wasn't made any better by the shit finish. Both guys may have had one of the single worst lockup sequences I think I've ever seen in my life. And admittedly so, I am still trying to figure out that count-out finish. Mercer tried to explain it as both guys getting counted out on the apron, which, after having rewatched a handful of these world-class matches from back in the day, the apron count-out finish seems to be a go-to for some reason. But, yeah, this wasn't good at all. Luckily, everything else picked up after the opening match, but yeah, that was a rough sit-through. Storyline development was a key element of the show this week, especially with the Flair Carry title program. Mercer did an interview with referees Bronco Lubick and David Manning, and he informs us that the NWA is sanctioning a special guest referee for the cage match showdown between Flair and Carey, in addition to either Bronco or David getting assigned as the primary ref. In other words, it's a long-winded way of saying there's going to be two referees in the match. But this is a key crucial element to the story because there are 4 individuals that were being balloted as the potential guest ref. We got Duke Kiyomuka, who I believe was the father of Pat Tanaka. Wild Bill Curry, Ken Mantell, and most importantly, Michael Hayes. And early polling pretty much indicated from the jump that Hayes was favored in the voting. And again, if you have any recollection of the cage match from the Christmas Star Wars event, you know that Hayes plays an integral role in that match. Aside from that, though, Manning and Lubick just pleaded their case as to why they felt they should be chosen as the main ref for the match. Really not much else to it. Up next was the start of this little 6-man tournament series they were starting. I can't recall exactly what Bundy said during his promo, but I think there was some kind of trophy at stake. Either that or some luxury car. Because I remember he made a passing joke in there about his team joyriding with beautiful women after they win the tournament. And, well, considering one of his partners was a masked man, I can only imagine the sheer comedy of seeing pre-tapes of the alpha male spoiler having a good time with the ladies while he's still wearing the mask. But this one was the Great Kabuki, Checkmate, and the Magic Dragon taking on Brian Adias, Al Madrill, and Bugsy McGraw. It was a pretty fun little tag match. Attendance for the week was pretty low, especially for the holiday season, but boy, you never would have known it with the way the people were reacting to this. It was the usual deal with the faces running wild early on. Heels got a brief heat sequence midway through. I wrote down Bugsy and Dragon exchanging blows that may have been giving it too much credit. It was more like Bugsy and Dragon trying to pretend that they weren't winded as fuck. By the way, brief side note here. Not that this has any relevance to the match at all. For about 75% of the match, my attention was diverted from the ring to taking note of the absolutely beautiful female blonde who, God bless her soul, could not have given 2 fucks less about anything going on during this match. And things kind of broke down at the end. I looked away from the match for all of 3 seconds to type a few additional notes, and when I opened my tab back up, the heels had somehow won. I believe Kabuki hit a flying knee attack on one of the faces, and I mean, obviously I could have gone back to replay it, but what's done is done. Then we get the big highlight of the program this week. We had Fritz and Ric Flair in a split-screen confrontation. And considering the gravity of the situation between Flair and the Von Erichs, and the fact that Flair was having a face-to-face with Fritz Von Erich, split screen was probably a safe bet. But Flair ends up denying that he ever put a bounty out on Kerry. We had full-fledged rage mode from Fritz here, basically confirming in the most PG manner possible that Kerry was going to rip Flair's head off and become the new world champion on the 25th. And because Flair's entire mission in wrestling was to always prove that he was the craziest man in the entire business, he goes into beat red, off-the-cuff, raging Flair mode and says that when he gets Kerry in the cage, someone's going to get hurt, and the Von Erichs are going to have to pay the consequences. Flair also informed us here that he does not mind bleeding and sweating. Yeah, no shit, Rick. Preaching to the choir, bro. All joking aside, God, this was so great. And, just a phenomenal reminder of just the way main event programs used to be built up when guys knew how to cut authentic, fiery babyface promos. There was not a shred of doubt in my mind during this entire thing that had Fritz and Flair had that interview conducted in one of those bullshit contract signing situations where they're in the same room at the same time, I had no doubt that Fritz would have dived on top of Flair to try to strangle this man on live camera. That or he would have died trying. And our main event match of the night is Kevin Von Erich taking on King Kong Bundy. And you want to talk about the ultimate classic mean, ugly heel taking on the all-American white meat babyface. King Kong Bundy and Kevin Von Erich are the two perfect poster children for that story. Kevin's jacked to the gills, probably 1% body fat, if that. Meanwhile, Bundy's a big old, bald, ugly man, probably pushing 4 bills. They had a classic old school main event style match. Kevin working as the underdog throughout the entirety. Fans are going crazy, chanting, "We want the claw." Fast forward to the end, we had David Manning taking perhaps the single greatest referee bump I think I've ever seen in the history of wrestling. And, well, the finish here was Bundy dumping Kevin over the top rope while the ref was down. And as he goes to give Kevin a suplex back into the ring over the top rope, Manny slides back in, and that allows for Bundy to get the cheap win. And judging from the promo earlier on, I presume that Bundy gets his guaranteed title shot down the road against Kevin. Solid main event, though. Overall, I would say, well, for sure, you absolutely have to check out the Flair Fritz showdown. That is one of the best promo battles that you could possibly ask for, and everything about it just felt totally real. And honestly, the wrestling was pretty solid too on the show, discounting the opener, which I'd probably recommend you skip. And before we wrap up, I did want to note this. My plan is to recap the Flair-Kerry cage match from the Christmas show on the 25th. Unfortunately, the Peacock does not have the Star Wars library uploaded in full, so I will not be able to review the entire show, which probably isn't a bad thing looking at the scope of the key programs on this show right now. But I will watch the world title match and talk about that extensively because it is a very important match in the timeline as we advance through the archives here into 1983 for World Class. So stay posted for that at the end of the month. And for now, if you guys want to stay posted with all future FSWR content going forward, make sure you subscribe, keep the bell icon tuned to stay notified of our 2 weekly uploads, and make sure you comment and like the show to help me out in the algorithms, especially here on YouTube. We'll be back on Monday for the Rampage, Power, and in-depth analysis of my Chairshot article centered around, drumroll. Can you hear that? You can hear my USB cord. Well, AEW. And what specifically about AEW? Well, mostly a focus on what they need to prioritize in the year 2022. We'll be taking a look at 3 specific issues and see if AEW will make it an effort to address any of them in the coming year. Probably not. But it's worth a shot. And again, if you want a preview of that, you can check the description or head on over to the site to give it a read right now. And we will be back on Monday. Until then, take care all. Peace out.